Hey guys, Kevin Gamer for Flesh and Bone, episode 7, Full Dress, and I was definitely looking forward to this episode, especially the cliffhanger at the end of the last episode. Holy shit, I had no idea what was going to happen in this. I mean, there were so many questions left at the end of it, and this episode was by far the best one so far. This episode was amazing. I absolutely loved it. Like I said, guys, I'm currently on the finale, so I'm like 10 minutes into it, so I don't really know. Well, I can't really, the questions I asked in this episode are still justifiable because I'm only like 10 minutes in the finale, and so far only one scene's happened. But this episode is by far the best episode so far. I mean, there were so many great moments in this episode. You really can tell we're going to get to a very satisfying conclusion. Just by this looks of this episode, it feels like that's where we're headed, that they're going to give these characters the necessary wrap-up that they need, and I'm very happy about that. In fact, I was a bit worried, I have to say, because of the fact that there's been so many stories, there's been so many storylines throughout this whole show. I was worried that we wouldn't get a very good wrap-up, and it looks like by the looks of this episode, the season finale, the series finale is not going to disappoint, but let's just get into it. We see right away the full dress. There is actually a term for this one, which there wasn't for the last one. We see that it means when soldiers wear full combat gear. Now, the reason it's called full dress is a very small detail, but we'll get into that. We see right away that Mia is in the hospital, and we realize that she did, in fact, try to kill herself. Now, I didn't know if that was clear, because, we didn't actually see what happened. We see that there are bandages on her wrists, and I think we're led to believe that she tried to slit her wrists and kill herself. So the nurse comes in, gets her to wake up. She gives her food and says the only way out, and Claire comes to see her. The nurse asks who she is. Claire says she's her friend, and the nurse asks what she's doing out in the hall. And I like that Claire had genuine concern for me. I mean, they've had a very interesting, relationship, and Claire considers her a friend, which is very interesting. So she says she might be the one to talk some sense into her. Claire says that Monica told her that they could start visiting today, and Claire says she didn't know if she wanted her to, and she doesn't have to stay. She proceeds to leave, and Claire says she just came to see if she could do anything. She says the police said that Romeo found her, that he saved her life, and he's disappeared since then. She has no idea where he is. Obviously, he was pretty freaked out by seeing Mia, in this state, and obviously it freaked him out. So Claire says she doesn't see him around, though she does hear him on the roof sometimes, and she tells her they're in tech now, and it's crazy, they opened in 3 days, and this really gets Mia to start crying, just thinking about what she's missing, realizing that she's missing all of this, realizing what she did. I think she's really regretting what she's doing, and I really felt bad for Mia in this scene. I think this was probably one of the first episodes where I felt genuinely bad for Mia. Not that I haven't in the other episodes, but especially this episode, I felt really bad for her. I mean, you can tell that she obviously probably takes her anger out on Claire and all the dancers because she really is just very insecure, and you really see that here. She says she shouldn't have said that. She tells Mia she'll be back and to focus on getting out of there and to do what they tell her. Mia says she can't. She rejects the food that they gave her, which is, very relatively like TV dinner food, and Claire actually gets her food that she knows she likes, and as she eats the food that was brought to Mia, she tells Mia to try to eat. She starts to eat. It was a really great scene. I really love this, and Mia asks Claire why she's doing this, because obviously, why would Claire be doing this? And then she says that it's her turn. Now, that was very interesting that she said that. She said, it's your turn. I think she's saying that, it's her turn for Mia to get some generosity, She's already gotten the necessary generosity she needs. It's time for Mia to get that respect, and I like that Claire does that. I like how this never really turned into a rivalry between Claire and Mia. I honestly really do like that, because I was worried this where we were going in a very cliche direction, but no, I think Mia just wants to be like Claire. Claire has this confidence. She doesn't necessarily have confidence, but she's just more professional about things, and Mia's not, and I feel like she just wishes that she was Claire. So Claire leaves the hospital, and Lanny sees Claire, and we get so many details in this one scene. She asks where the hell she's been. She says her daughter's been there for 2 weeks, and there isn't a single actual American that works there. She asks where the rest of them are, and Claire says it's tech, and Lanny is happy that Claire at least came and hugs her. She says Mia's only 22 years old, has a whole life ahead of her. She says she raised her right, but her fucking disease she didn't even know about. And Claire thinks that she's talking about Mia's eating disorder, but we actually find out that she has MS. So yes, that is why Mia reacted to the test results the way she did, because she actually has MS. And if you guys know what MS is, it is muscular syndrome, I think. It's something like muscular sclerosis. I don't know. Let me look that up real quickly, because I don't want to... It is a disease in which the immune system eats away the protective covering of nerves. So basically, it's really bad, obviously, for Mia. And Claire did not know about this at all, and we didn't know about this either. It's a very powerful scene, and Lanny says she's not only to say a word to anyone, she agrees, and I like seeing Lanny have genuine concern. I mean, before it seemed like she only cared about her daughter being a star, but I think this really gave her that reality check that she needs to be there for her, and in her mind, Lanny doesn't think she did anything wrong. She tells her this is not over, she can only have a few years, but she's crippled, and she tells Claire she's gotta help her. She says Mia is pushing her away, looks at her, and she doesn't know what she did, what she said. She never did nothing but love her, and I really felt bad for Lanny because, you see that Lanny really does love Mia, but just a few things she said really affected Mia. I don't think Lanny really thought about what she was saying to her daughter, and I don't really think Lanny ever meant for what was, said to her daughter to be taken with such a grain of salt. I think that Mia just saw it as very insulting, and plus, all the shit she's going through, it just toppled onto that, and you can tell that Lanny feels really bad about. Really great scene. Whoever played Lanny, amazing performance there. Really great stuff. Already we were off to a great start. But then we get into Jessica's scene in this episode, which Jessica so far I feel has been a bit underused in the show. She's had good stuff overall, but this was the episode that proved how great of a character Jessica really is. I loved all the scenes with her in this episode. It really made up for the lack of Jessica that we've been getting. I'm not necessarily saying we've had a lack of her, but it feels like the past several episodes we haven't had as much as we should, and this episode, almost every scene, if it's not Claire, it is Jessica, and I love that. So Jessica tries some food from a man named Bronson who tells her that they're $22.50 per pound, impossible to get, and she says that he will get them for the gala only because he loves her, and Monica says that she needs to talk to her, and we realize that the check, now remember that check that was written to her? Well, apparently that check bounced, and Jessica says that that's not possible. She says they're holding the truck, so they're going to put back every bottle back on the shelf, and if they don't clear it up by tonight, and they can't have, obviously they can't have a gala with no booze, so Jessica says it's got to be a glitch, there's money in that account, and she says to tell him to process the payment again. She says that he said he tried, and he's not going to tell her what else he said. She tells Monica to tell Bronson Paul's a crisis and she had to handle it, and sign up whenever he needs and then get him out of there. So Jessica then talks to the man on the phone, tells him to check it again. She thanks him and then goes into the bathroom, and this scene with Peter, where she calls Peter on her voicemail, you see two things in Jessica. You see the desperation, and you also see the, I think just the vulnerability of her. I mean, this is a woman that's gone through a lot, and up till now, we haven't really seen Jessica really hurting. We've seen her upset, obviously, but it's been more of just angry, and that sadness really comes out in this episode, and it was really amazing to see. Jessica talks to the man on the phone. Basically, she calls Pierre, it goes to voicemail. She tells him his check bounced and they were counting on it. It's spent, and she asks how he could let this happen and to please explain to her because she doesn't understand how he is sailing around the Caribbean or playing blackjack with British whores while his daughter's waiting for him. And I really love this scene because obviously, he doesn't seem to care really much about Molly. And she says she's done trying to convince Molly that she has a decent father. She said the next time the judge wants to threaten his ass with contempt, she will stand up and fucking cheer. She says enjoy Christmas in jail. She hangs up and cries, and then she calls him again, because obviously she knows that she went a little too far there. She says she didn't mean the jail thing, they just really need the money now, and she knows he's going to fix it. She says he is a good father. She goes to the file cabinet, and I just really love that scene to her. So then she goes to the file cabinet, finds Daphne's file, makes a call, and calls Maxwell. And obviously, Chalmer was not the one that made the call. She says that Daphne's fine, and she says she does the same thing when her daughter's school calls. Sometimes a parent's mind just goes there. She says she's calling to thank him for the gift and to find out if he is ready to move to their next donor level. And she says she's referring to the donation he made earlier this year in the $250K, which of course he did not give Daphne, and she realizes that he wasn't the one that did it. So she hangs up the call, and then we see at Tech, Paul is very frustrated. All of that happy stuff with him is gone, because obviously they're in Tech right now, so you knew it was going to be crazy. But I have to say that I honestly can relate to it, because Tech really is this crazy. If you have ever been in any kind of show, you should have been able to relate to this. Tech really is as hectic as it is in this episode. And he tells Trey that he wanted this for him, for the city and the nation, and Trey really, he's not doing as well as Paul thought. He talks about how he was moved by the thought of some little brown boy sitting there in the dark watching Trey to show him the possibility, and Trey says he doesn't know what to do and asks him what he wants, and he says what he wants for someone to find Ross, and Ross has now replaced Trey. It's that easy, and, even though this is opening night, they need to make the best decision possible, so It's that easy to replace him. I think that Trey understands that. Obviously, he's a bit upset because of what just happened, but obviously, that's what was going to happen. So Daphne takes a smoke break. Jessica goes to confront her. She asks if she can have a smoke, and what I love about Jessica in this episode is just the determination in her. You really see that. You see that she's willing to do anything she can to make sure she gets this money. So she asks if she can have a smoke. Daphne gives her the cigarette and asks if she's having a relapse. Jessica says she knows the donor isn't her dad and that she lied. Daphne says they got her money. She tells her she could have gotten them in trouble with the IRS and it would have been a big problem and she needs the donor's name to clear things up. And Jessica never yells in this scene. I was surprised. I thought Jessica was getting pissed at Daphne, but no, she's never, yelling at her because I think she's just kind of worn out and very vulnerable from what's going on, and she has so much on her plate that she's just kind of weak at this point. And Daphne says they've had anonymous donors in the past. Jessica says they were anonymous to the public and not to them. She says she needs a name, and she says the money is gone. They spend it on costumes and Tony and commissioning the music and 3 bottles on wine. And she says if she can't secure more, they won't make it past opening night. She says to just give her the name. She'll tell him she identified him through tax records, and Daphne refuses. Obviously, she doesn't want to do this. She doesn't want to, openly say Sergei's name when they agreed to make it anonymous, and she says it's her company too. They're all responsible for what happens to it. Daphne says she's responsible for dancing to the best of her ability, for keeping her weight a few pounds over malnourished, and showing up to rehearsals on time. Jessica says she could lose her job. She says she knows it might be hard for her to understand with how she grew up juxtaposed to Jessica's. Of course, Jessica grew up with a kid, and Daphne is used to this rich lifestyle where everything just came easy for her. But for Jessica, of course, she has to face real money problems, and Daphne doesn't really understand that. So she says to just give her a name so she can't lose this job, and Daphne says she can't either. And Jessica then goes to smoke, and Kiira then goes backstage to take a pill, then puts ice on her foot. A lot of amazing scenes with Kiira in this episode. I really loved it. And it also shows that Kiira is not the villain in this show. While she is doing some villainous things, she's not the villain. I think Kiira is just more of another very vulnerable character because, she is getting older and she is deteriorating, but she doesn't really see it. And she goes backstage to take a pill. Paul tells her not to not get up, and Kiira says to not freak out. It's nothing. He says they talked about this. She was to do 2 ballets. He says it's just that Tony's piece is so physical, the impact and the stress she reads off of her resume. He says he would be lying if he said there wasn't some concern. She asks who is concerning. He says Tony mentioned she might want to go with Claire tomorrow to save her ankle after Ruby's. And she says the public comes to see her. He says that they will in Ruby's. She says Tony doesn't understand them. And she says a little pain is a fact of this life. It's to feel it is a choice. And she clearly just doesn't want to admit that her ankle is broken and that she really should not be dancing. He says he adores her, but our bodies betray us all eventually. She says her body has betrayed no one. He says he wonders if for the sake of the company she might consider. She says she thinks he can't do it, and, that he thinks that she can't do it. That's what it's all about, and he doesn't want her to do it if he wants Claire. And she says to tell her to look into her eyes and say it to her face. She says 10 years she gives him her life and her body. She says he was nothing before her, simply a joke. It has been a fucking busboy with a bad back and a rich boyfriend. Now, we are to assume that boyfriend is, in fact, the person that, I can't think of his name right now, but the person that, obviously, Paul was upset about is his boyfriend. So that definitely makes a lot of sense. Obviously, you can kind of see that Paul started from scratch. Kiira helped him out, and that's probably why he's so crushed over the death of this man. Obviously, you can understand that. So basically, we see that, but she made him she throws things at him, tells him to get out, and she cries. Claire then notices the poster out of her outside, and at tech, Paul watches Tony's piece. He tells him to stop. He says to imagine they haven't all fucked each other's blind in the bathrooms. He says they're delicate, sparkling gems, and to gleam and to dazzle. He thanks them, tells them to move on to another piece, and then he tells Claire that she's late, and we get a very big scene here. Again, we haven't really had the Whiplash feels, but again, in this scene, I really felt it. I felt like I was watching Whiplash in this scene, and I love that. I think it's fantastic. Jeffrey was the man's name, by the way, Jeffrey. So this scene really was incredible between Claire and Paul. It really sums up their whole relationship as a whole. So he says she picked the wrong day to try his patience. She says she was at the hospital wanting to see Mia. He asks why she'd do that. She says she's her friend, and he said there's nothing and no one that supersedes his commitment to him. This is her life. He is her roommate, her friend, basically just her everything. He is everything. And he says he's everything to her except her mother because she will still love her if she fails, and obviously Paul won't. So she says she never knew her mother, and he says she arrived on his doorstep from her grimy, inconsequential hiccup of a life, and after spit shining her, he gave her an opportunity. He says he could have given it to 100 other girls, but he gave it to her and asked her if he knows how fortunate she is. She asks if he does because she's pretty sure that he needs her, and he says to come with him, and he says this might be a good time to tell her about a certain phone call he made to the artistic director of a former company back in Pittsburgh, and he says he can only speculate on what happened to make her leave so abruptly, and there's certainly a lot of speculation on there, and he says he's sure she knows too well how word gets around a small town. He says he can only speculate on what would happen if he were to send her back there on the end of the season, and that's very interesting, and he wants to send her back there. So, back to the shit pile fertility, she calls home, and he says he needs her, she needs him for now. She goes to start Tony's, and she needs him for now. So, I thought that was a very powerful scene. It shows that despite the tension between them, they both need each other, and if Claire was to leave, Paul would be out of business because he would be losing a star, and if, Claire was to, if Claire was to disappoint Paul, obviously she would be a failure for the rest of her life, and I really love seeing that, because, yeah, it's true, they really do need each other. So, basically, Paul says he's died and gone. Then we see that, she goes to start Tony's piece. They're having lighting problems. Paul says he's died and gone to Stevie Nicks' house. I mean, Paul had actually some really funny lines this episode. She says to jump to the next cue, which Paul is also annoyed about. Something then falls, and they clear the stage. And yes, guys, this stuff happens during tech. I mean, it can really be this crazy. They're told the track is busted, and Paul says to repair it immediately so he can finish tech. And the tech says he can fix it. He can't fix it. It's fried, and he needs a new motor assembly, and he's got to hire a new one. To the point where they gotta wait till tomorrow, and obviously Paul's really pissed off about this, and he's obviously very upset that this has gone this way. He didn't expect anything like this to happen. This is something that when you're in tech, you never want to happen. You never want to think that the worst thing is going to happen, but that's exactly what's happening here. The worst possible thing is happening, the worst possible things, and he says if he orders it right now, they will have it in stock, and after that, they need an inspection. Paul tells them to tell him this isn't happening. He says to call Pinky or the goddamn assemblage and have an inspector standing by, and he tells them all to get the fuck out. The afternoon is theirs, and then we get this great scene between Daphne and Claire. That's the thing with this episode, by the way, guys. Every scene was building. There's been some scenes in this episode that are kind of filler. None of that in this episode. Every scene was building, and every scene in this episode was very important, and I love that. So Daphne says to Claire they should head downtown and make the most of the 16 hours they have off since Sergei is wondering where she's been, and Claire openly refuses. She doesn't want to go back, obviously because she was fazed by seeing those children, and now we know why, probably. I don't think it's just because these were children. She had a daughter, and I think she's thinking her daughter could have been like that, and Daphne says if a girl ever needs some party, it's her. And Claire says she's fine. Daphne says she thought there was a reason she was being a total bitch. She says she's not going back there after the girls. And Daphne doesn't know what she's talking about exactly. I mean, obviously it didn't really faze her that much. So Sergei's mobs her out with the teenage sex slaves, and Daphne says to keep her voice down. Claire says she thinks it's none of her business. She needs to get away from Sergei. He's not who she wants him to be. Daphne says she's got to handle. Claire says it's only because he decided she's worth something, unlike that girl who's floating face down in the harbor, somewhere she wasn't, and didn't matter at all. And Daphne says she doesn't know what the fuck she's talking about, but thanks her for the sanctimony. She says to give her $5 if she puts the rose he gave her in water when she got home. And Daphne and Claire's friendship is definitely strained right now. Definitely. It's really caused a lot of problems there. So Kiira then tells Jasper how Paul wants to force her out of the piece, and she's fighting for her life, and she asks Jasper to help her, and he says that he thinks her stress fracture is splitting, and she needs an x-ray, and she says she needs the shot just to get her through tomorrow. He says, bupivacaine numbs everything, and she could shatter her peronis and never feel a thing. She says that's good. He says he says it's bad, and she says she's not afraid. He says that's what scares him. She says this is her career, and right now she's asking to please help her. He says beauty dies, and she asks if he's giving her the shot or not. He says he can't and won't, and he's sorry. She asks why he's sorry, even because he's ruining her life, and he says he wants her to heal, and promises her that there will be other ballets, and she says he knows better than that, asks if she wants him to beg because she will. She takes off her top and says to do it for her, and he's not into this. He's not having it. He doesn't care that she's trying to seduce him, or he pushes her off as what's the matter with her. He says to cover herself. I mean, I like that Jasper genuinely cares about her. He gives her cocaine, shows her where to get the shot, and he wants her to do it himself because he just can't bring himself to do it. He doesn't want to do that to her. So Jessica smokes, trying to find the donor. She finds a business that gave $250,000. She asks what kind of business. She's reaching the address. She goes to the location, and it's a sewing business. She's gone to the wrong location. It's a dry cleaners. I love the scene where she's asking if they know anyone who supports the ballet. And I love the lady's just like, this is dry cleaner. And she's like, oh shit. I mean, it was a pretty funny scene. I definitely enjoyed that. She says she's sorry, she's in the wrong place. She then sees A on the road, which is the same A that her cigarettes are made from. Of course, that A is for Anastasia. So she goes to Anastasia and leaves after what she sees. Sergei asks her if she was a ballet dancer, and the scene between Sergei and Jessica, I really loved. You really see this as two people who are very passionate about ballet, and both have very different lives, but both have the same passion, and I love that. Sergei asks her if she was a ballet dancer. She says she was a long time ago, and he says it wasn't so long. And she says she works at the ballet, now company manager. She thanks him for the tip, and he says to sit and they will discuss. Obviously, he says unusual, seeking out anonymous donor, and she says she's sorry for showing up like this, but they're looking for someone to make a critical and 11th hour contribution, $35,000 to give the company's final performance. He said it's a small sum, and she says it's crucial, obviously will remain anonymous, no one has to know. He asked if that's how much she took, and she says she was going to give it back. She's not a criminal, she's a mother, and he realizes that she needed money for Molly. The money was not for the company, the money was genuinely for Molly, because she needed to get that money for her daughter and make sure that her daughter had that money no matter what happened, and she's crying, she's saying she's sorry, because she basically manipulated everyone. She made Paul think they need this money. She made the entire company think they need this money, when really she just needed it for her daughter, and that is a fantastic twist. It makes Jessica as a character so much more interesting. She could have easily just been a one-note Paul's assistant. That's exactly what I thought Jessica was going to be. The first episode, I didn't think Jessica was going to have her own plot line. I thought she was simply just going to be Paul's assistant. That's it. But she's so much more than that. She is a mother that's going through a lot. She clearly has this job to help out her daughter. She has a passion for ballet, obviously, but she really wants to help her daughter, and she wants to give her that money. And it's such a powerful scene. I love that we found this out. And he says he wants a house, and basically he then tells her that he's no longer interested in remaining anonymous, and he deserves honor as major donor, and she agrees. He says he wants a house seat opening night and have an invitation to the gala for himself and friends. She says that's not a problem. He says he needs 11 seats. They shake on it, and the more money, the better, honestly. The more money they get him, the better. So it seems like they have a real business deal here, which could be good, but of course, Claire sees him, it's not going to end up well. So Romeo then sees Claire walking home and goes to meet her, and of course this is the first time that Romeo's talked to Claire since the Mia incident, and you can see how scared Romeo is. Just a very interesting scene, definitely. Probably the first scene with Romeo that wasn't happy. I mean, it's probably the first time that Claire's genuinely pissed at Romeo. He asks if she's read the book. He says he's been afraid to ask, but everything's moved faster now, so he has to. He says he can't wait any longer to ask, and she says she has to read the book. She says he did a good thing for Mia, and she says he needs to get out of the way, and he says that there are bigger needs to be done, and he says to read the book, and she says he ruined the book. She trusts him, and he ruined it. He says it's not her book, and he literally screams to her, it's not her book. The first time we've ever seen Romeo really upset, and you see that he really regrets yelling at Claire after this. She tells him to get away from her. He says that was the wrong time, the wrong thing to do. He cries, and once again he says blood is in the water, but then he adds behold the dragon. Now we do find out what that means in the finale, I will say that, but I think that is an incredible scene. We don't know what he's talking about, but he seems to just be fazed by this blood is in the water, behold the dragon, and he says it to random people as they go by. They want him to get out of the way, but you just see that he obviously is traumatized with what's going on. And by the way, guys, when you find out what's going on in the finale, it makes his character even more interesting, and they really are developing Romeo very well in this episode. And I think they definitely develop him really well in the finale as well. So Claire keeps the window shut so Romeo can't look through. She doesn't want anything to do with him, obviously. All he did was make her life more of a living hell. She thinks of the book and what it meant to her and thinks of her time with Bryan. It's a really powerful scene. I mean, this book was kind of like the driving force of her life. It was the thing that had made her think she had possibility, and now this book is ruined. She really feels like a part of her has died inside. I mean, think of if you had this book that you've had since you were a child and it's meant everything to you. This was exactly what this book meant to Claire. It meant everything to her. She's kept it since she was a child, and now she's lost it, and obviously she's really upset about it, and I really felt bad for Claire in this scene. She's also thinking of her time with Bryan. It's very interesting. So at Tech, Paul waits for the guy to get over, and it's fixed, and luckily they can continue the rehearsal. So Kiira gives herself, and by the way, guys, that's what can happen sometimes. I mean, there have been times where there have been rehearsals, and they just stop the performance because of lighting problems, or a problem with the set or something. That happens in Tech. It is probably one of the most hellish things you can go through. There's a reason why they call it Hell Week, guys. It's not pleasant. I'm going to tell you guys that right now. If you ever go through Tech Week, you know that it's hell. You know that it's probably the worst week of your life. Yes, you have friends with you, but maybe you're having fun with the show, but until it's opening night, it pretty much is hell, and I will definitely attest to that. I mean, it really is not very fun. I mean, my school musical, like, we have very late nights. We have to wait for stage crew. We have to wait for all the people working the set. It's really hard work, and you really see that here. So, Kiira gives herself the shot, goes to rehearsal. Ivana asks why she's in costume since this is not a dress rehearsal, but Tony says she's not. She dances, and that's why this episode is called Full Dress, because of Kiira's performance. And basically, she dances, and everyone loves it. Tony tells her that it was impeccable. She says to reset for Claire, and Kiira then tells Paul that she doesn't go on stage to disappoint, and he says she was perfect and to go ice her foot, and then we see Claire. Claire tells her that she was great. She says it was prima, and Tony calls her to the stage, and she does the dance and that Kiira just did. And as she dances, she sees everyone watching her, and she kind of uses it. She thinks about everything people have said to her, and she kind of uses this to go through the, to get out the aggression of the performance requires. And I really love this scene. You see her, she's trying to get out everything people have said to her, and it was a very powerful scene there. Everyone applauds, and it's great stuff. So Paul goes to talk to her, but she leaves, and Kiira looks at a shattered picture. She's throwing everything away. She's packing everything up. We don't know why she's leaving. But then we realize what's going on, because Claire finds her, and Kiira tells her that the piece is all hers, and Kiira has quit. Kiira's not been fired. She has decided to quit, and I don't know why. I think she's realizing that her body's just deteriorating, and Claire's going to be the star, and that Claire's eventually going to take over. I think she knows that's inevitable, and that clearly, Claire is his muse, and she's not, and she's just living in the past, and I think she's finally giving herself that reality check, and very interesting stuff there. So Claire then goes to her dressing room, crouches down under a table, and cries, and then she calls Bryan, and he keeps declining the call. He doesn't want to talk to her. She calls him again. Frank tells Bryan to get him out of the bathtub, and he tells him to grab him. While he grabs the bar, he carries him, sets him down. Frank slaps him, and then he looks terrified. Like, Frank looks genuinely terrified of his son, thinking that his son's just gonna beat the shit out of him. I honestly thought Bryan was going to, like, slit his dad's throat or something, or drown him. I honestly thought Bryan was going to do something drastic, but he doesn't. Instead, he leaves him sitting on the toilet, even though Frank asked him to get up. He leaves him sitting there, and, he finally picks up the phone. She's crying, and he tells her that she's okay. She's gonna be okay. She's a big girl, and she's real. He says he doesn't know what else to say, and she says to come there. He says he can't. She says she needs to see him and needs him to see. And basically, just a really powerful scene there. To Claire, Bryan is the only real thing in her life. Obviously, even though she's tried to push Bryan away, I think she's realizing she needs Bryan. Bryan is someone that clearly adores her. Even though he's in love with her and this is her brother, I don't think she necessarily loves him, but I think she just needs someone to comment her and help her and heal her, and Bryan's gonna be the one to do that. So Kiira goes to her home, and basically, then we see the Kiira. She goes to her home to face Prescott, and I think she's finally going to tell Prescott the truth about herself and stop living in this lie. I really feel that Kiira is trying to turn things around and is ending, the lie that she's been living. Because let's face it, Kiira's been living in a lie. She's had this fake relationship with Prescott. She never really loved him. She only really married him for money. She clearly has feelings for Jasper. She doesn't really like Prescott at all. And I feel that she's going to finally tell him what's actually going on. I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with that. So Claire then lies down. We hear a voice message of her telling Bryan them hooking up on Thanksgiving was a mistake. She says Mia's not here, so he could just crash in her room. She throws the books off of her, which mean nothing to her. I think she's realizing this was a horrible thing that she was doing. She goes into the bathroom. She pulls out scissors, and I didn't know what she was going to do. I thought she was going to maybe cut herself or start hurting herself again. But no, she takes the high pony she always wears, and she starts to cut it, and that's how the episode ends. So, overall, guys, really awesome episode. I mean, for a penultimate episode, this was amazing. I don't know how they're going to top it in the finale, but holy shit. This was an amazing episode. So many amazing scenes in this one. Bryan going to Claire. Why do you think that Claire wants Bryan back? Like I said, I feel like she really just needs someone to praise her and adore her. Will she make amends with Romeo? I'm not really sure. What does his prophecy mean? You know, the whole thing with him saying blood is in the water, behold the dragon. What does all of that mean? Obviously, it means something near and dear to him, which again, guys, I have seen the part of the finale, so I know what that means, but I'm not going to tell you guys, but let me just say it's really interesting, and it makes his character even more interesting than it is. Kiira. I loved what happened with Kiira in this episode. I think she's finally going to stop living her life the way she is. I think she's finally going to apologize to Prescott, and I think Kiira genuinely wants to punish herself. I think she's realizing that she needs to stop living in this lie, and if she really is hurt, you know, if she really is going to possibly die or something, and she's really deteriorating, she can't keep living this lie, and she needs to tell Prescott the truth, and I think that really is what's going to happen there. Mia and her MS. What is going to happen to her? Is she going to make a recovery? Is she going to get out of the hospital? Is Claire going to get her out of the hospital? I'm not really sure. I mean, we kind of just left that storyline opened, which I like, but it really seems like we're going to get a really good conclusion there, so I don't really know what's going to happen to Mia. Like I told you guys, though, I really feel by the end of this show, Mia's going to be what Claire was in the beginning of this show. That really is what I think is going to happen here. I love seeing the scenes with Jessica. How is Claire going to react to Sergei being at the, at the ballet? Obviously, she's going to be really upset, but I think she really needs to talk to Sergei. Hopefully, Claire and Daphne can make amends, because you guys know I really do like Claire and Daphne's friendship. It's one of my favorite parts of the show, honestly, is their friendship. I think it's really great. But overall, guys, I thought this was an amazing episode. I definitely really loved it. I also love seeing Paul's problems in this episode. Very funny stuff. I really enjoyed it. It also seems like Paul and Tony are starting to clash, though, so I'm not really sure what's going to happen. And honestly, guys, I gotta tell you, I have no idea what's going to happen in the finale, and I love that. A lot of times I know, but this is a show where I don't know what's going to happen, and I really hope we get that satisfying conclusion that we need. I mean, it seems like we're going to get it. From the looks of this episode, the way it ends, it really seems like we're going to get that satisfying conclusion. We're going to get the necessary endings that we need, and I love that, because of course, guys, this is an 8-episode show. This is not season 1. This is just, it's going to be the series finale, and I really hope that it's a very satisfying finale. I don't know if they'll be able to top it after this episode. Hopefully they can, because this episode really was something amazing. But let me know what you guys saw this episode. I absolutely love this episode. By far the best one so far. And we'll see you guys in my next video, which I'm hoping is for the finale. I don't think it's going to be. I'm hoping it is. I don't know if it's going to be. But I will see you guys in the next video, which will either be for that or for tonight's episode of The Walking Dead. And I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.